Well, greetings from Central Texas. Yeah! Somehow, I had managed to lose my bag of earplugs. If you've camped before, this item is essential to your sleep health outdoors. That last night in New Mexico, it seemed like every bug and bird in the neighborhood was croaking and chirping. A couple of hours into trying to fall asleep behind the church, I heard drops of water falling onto the top of my tent. It wasn't raining, so I was baffled. It dawned on me that there was heavy condensation dripping off of the church's metal roof, in which I was directly underneath. This dripping was the last straw for me. I leapt out of my tent and ripped the whole thing as hard as I could over a few feet, so I would not succumb to this evil dripping any longer. Of course, this disheveled everything in my tent. Now, it wasn't level or organized, but I didn't care. A couple hours later, I found myself in an even grimmer situation. Something about the pressure of sitting on a bicycle seat all day changes my normalcy. What I mean is my bowel's natural rhythm. Every morning, the instant I wake up from my sleep and sit up, I had to hit the restroom. Like the snap of a finger, and it's an emergency. This trip didn't afford me the luxury of a restroom to jump into most days. All I had today was the beautiful green grass I was sleeping on. This church's yard was suitable for disposal, but in a neighborhood with houses, only a waist-high chain-link fence offered separation from the transparent backyards. I was miles from the closest gas station and had no choice but to dig a trench and do my business between my tent and the building. It was a sticky situation. Thankfully, it was early morning, but complete daylight. I crossed my fingers nobody would call the cops, or even worse, the pastors showing up to check up on me. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Now I gotta skip town fast. Texas was a state that I was both excited and apprehensive about crossing, mostly because it was the largest state I would traverse. My path started in the northwest corner of La Mesa. I dipped down to Austin, touched the Alamo, and exited east of the Shiner Brewery. I'd never been to Texas before. Amongst my goals of seeing the major cities, I wanted to discover the small town life and the people. I was eager to compare my experiences in Kansas and Indiana small towns. I started in the Lone Star State completely exhausted. I'd gotten 6 hours of collective sleep in the last 2 days. Thankfully, I had some short mileage days coming up and felt ready to find a populated city. The landscape resembled West Texas: 2-lane highways, green pastures, too many semi-trucks, oil fields, and private luxury hunting areas. My first small town experience was in Seminole. It was a town of less than 7,000, and the first thing I saw was a brand new high school building with signs touting the football team. I stopped by a gas station to warm up some rice I hadn't finished the day before, and the clerk saw my bicycle outside. He was a lovely man in a button-up shirt and asked where I was going. I told him how I rerouted this way, and he agreed that Highway 176 would have been a death trap. Everyone in this area knows to avoid that road. A guy delivering sandwiches overheard our conversation and asked me, "You want some sandwiches, man? I'm a rep and can get you whatever you want." He gave me 4 packages and I was beyond stoked. Billy D was his name. He wasn't much older than me and was crazy excited about life. I learned he's from Lubbock and had lived in Texas his whole life. He treated me like a celebrity after I told him more about my ride. We took a picture together so he could show his wife that he met this guy. I wished him well and was grateful for the free grub. The rest of the day's ride was farmland and a brutal 15 to 20 mile an hour headwind. Only riding 40 miles that afternoon seemed like an eternity that put me into a mental time warp. When the elements and my morale are fighting against each other, I forget how long I've been on the road. I started dreaming about drowning my sorrows in La Mesa with a McDonald's Dr. Pepper and some Wi-Fi. My phone was still broken, and I had arranged with my roommate back home to mail my backup phone to a random post office, which I wouldn't get to for a couple of days. I had to rely on the internet for communication, and McDonald's was my savior by providing some sustenance. After dinner, I rode through the heart of town and noticed it was stuck in a mid-century aesthetic. There was an original town square and brick streets. They had a local football game radio broadcast playing on loudspeakers throughout the downtown. I saw an old auto shop with a rooftop statue of a 50s housewife holding a tire and smiling in approval. I swear the figure was 10 feet tall. I saw several food spots that I wish I could have eaten at. Drive-ins, dives, family restaurants, and donut shops. Reminded me of my small town life growing up. I stayed in their city park, which introduced me to a series of pleasant camps throughout rural Texas. Small towns had public campgrounds attached to the city park with bathrooms, showers, and RV hookups. It was fantastic. Before cooking myself some dinner, I made my first tire rotation. About 2,000 miles into this trip, I realized I would need new tires soon. A lot of my journey through Texas would be defined by its barbecue. Texas is Kansas City's direct barbecue adversary. I considered myself a barbecue connoisseur who loves trying different styles in the cities I visit. I've been to over 80 barbecue restaurants in my lifetime, and 90% of those are in Kansas City. My favorite barbecue places let you serve yourself, have sauce readily available, and feel a little gritty. I had my first Texas barbecue in Big Spring. I arrived in town ahead of schedule and was ready to pound down a late lunch. Some locals suggested a spot called Johnny's Feed Pit. I was excited and very hungry. I rode over to Johnny's, and as I was parking my bike, a lady came out and said, "I'm sorry to say this, but we ran out of food. We had 200 people come in for lunch, and they cleaned everything out that had already been cooked. Some might be ready later if you come back at 4. I was impressed, yet bummed that I couldn't try the best barbecue in town. I settled to go to Al's Barbecue and Burgers down the street. Here is where I gained my first lesson in Texas barbecue culture. You first order your food at the counter, grab your sides from a buffet-style area, and then pay at the end. I got a thick sliced brisket sandwich, and it was probably the smokiest beef I've ever tasted. Overall, I wasn't impressed with the experience, but I couldn't write Texas off yet. After lunch, I hung out at a library catching up on emails. This quiet time started out pleasant, but as time passed, I was startled by a guy behind me acting obnoxious. He was laughing uncontrollably and causing a stir. I presumed he was on a laptop watching YouTube videos or something. To my surprise, he was watching movies on a portable DVD player plugged into the wall. I had little patience for this annoyance, so I started to pack up my computer and got up to leave. As I walked away, I heard a voice say something to me and thought, "Oh, great." This middle-aged gentleman was missing 2 bottom and 4 top teeth and spoke with a thick Texas twang. If you've seen the movie Aladdin, this guy looks like Jafar when he pretends to be a street peddler. I had the image of Jafar's phony smile stuck in my head whenever he spoke. He asked if I had the bike outside, and I told him I was making a cross-country ride. He also had a bicycle, then cascaded into a monologue about owning 9 bikes, but can't fix them. The local bike shop won't order him the right tool he needs. I quickly realized he was a conspiracy theorist, and everything went downhill. He would use one story to lead into another account, and it seemed like a never-ending black hole of useless conversation. I live in a hotel and don't use the internet because I can't trust it. I don't use payphones, but also don't believe in cell phones. My mail is never sent from the post office. He thought everyone in town was conspiring to keep him there. I was starting to get embarrassed by the velocity of this conversation since we were still standing next to the library's study area. I tried to excuse myself by telling him I had to get going, and he followed me outside. I was desperately wanting to leave, and he started talking about how the government is just in it for the money and how he is above the law because he chooses not to live by it. He went to jail for not signing a ticket once and told the judge that he didn't follow the law. I was thoroughly checked out and couldn't find a good way out of this conversation. After 30 minutes outside, he finally pardoned himself and rode away on his bike. I waited a few minutes to let him get out of eyeshot, as I was concerned he might follow me to my camp spot. I continued my tour to barbecue in San Angelo, Texas. When I arrived, I spied a couple standing at a gas station and asked if they were from around here. They gave this standoffish look. I told them I was looking for a good barbecue place to eat at. They argued for 5 minutes about which restaurant would be the best and concluded the best food for the best price without riding across town. It was Bodacious Barbecue. I didn't know what to expect, but to my surprise, they had a daily deal. $9.99 for a sandwich, side, and drink. I'm beginning to like Texas. In Brady, Texas, I tried Fat Boy's Barbecue, and they also sold handmade wood furniture. They had this patio outside where they smoked all the meat and built tables. I started outside by the smoker, and they asked what kind of meat I wanted. The dude sliced it off and slaps it on a plate for me to pay inside. The guy running the smoker was a cowboy, bloodshot eyes, cowboy hat, and boots. Heavenly barbecue. I got inside, and they asked what kind of bread I wanted for the sandwich. I mentioned that I wanted beans for a side, and the lady said, "Beans are free. You just scoop them over there," as she pointed next to the soda fountain. I paid for my brisket and a single rib for only $10. I was in awe because you're lucky to get out of any barbecue joint under $20 in Kansas City. I got my beans and some sauce, then sat at a table. Every table had a loaf of bread and a roll of paper towels. The inside of the restaurant felt like a barn with exposed rafters and old gas station memorabilia on the walls. I tried the rib first, and it was absolutely perfect. Nothing compares, hands down. Next, I tried the brisket. It's juicy and tender. It was sliced thick and practically melted in my mouth. It had more flavor than any sauceless meat I'd ever tried before. While in Austin, I visited 2 barbecue joints suggested by my friends. The first was Rudy's. When we got to the counter, I told them I was from Kansas City and it was my first time visiting. The employees were super stoked, and one guy called out, "We need a sampler for the Kansas City rookie," while everybody else in the kitchen repeated in response. It was incredible. They went into detail about every cut of meat as they packaged up my plate. It all tasted great, but the turkey was the most flavorful. The experience those butchers gave me was top-notch. It wasn't as good as Fat Boys, but the Texas barbecue experience makes me wonder if Kansas City needs to return to school. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I found an old gas station called the Donut Shop when preparing to leave Brady, Texas. This place seemed like a gem, so I had to stop. I needed something to do while waiting for the post office to open and get my new phone. I entered the donut shop, and a little old lady behind the counter took my order. I got a traditional cake and a chocolate sprinkle. These are classics that can indicate the legitimacy of a donut joint. It cost me $1.30 total for 2 donuts. Heavenly. I met another guy who was working in the back. His name was Bruce. He was a dad-type figure with short black hair and a voice that seeped responsibility and humility. He resembled the infamous movie star Bruce Campbell from the cult classic B-horror film Evil Dead. He told me he met a cyclist from Finland once making a bike tour around the world. He said the guy was 75 but looked 45. I decided to get a coffee and relax in the side room where I heard a bunch of good old boys talking up a storm about the comings and goings of the town. I posted up at the back table, there was only 2 tables, and started eavesdropping on these 6 fellas. Their ages ranged from the early 50s to the late 70s. They were reminiscing about past experiences and joking around. I was cracking up at everything they said, wishing I could go to a place like this in Kansas City. Somebody quickly observed my typing on laptop and acknowledged how out of place I seemed. When I got up for more coffee, Bruce told me how these guys grew up together, and he learned everything about the town through them. He was a part of the fun just as much as the rest of them, always commenting on something with a witty remark. The 6 friends eventually left, leaving just Bruce and I. He asked where I was headed and gave me tips on what roads to take. He explained his upbringing in Texas and how Tommy Lee Jones and Matthew McConaughey owned property not too far from Brady. I put that donut shop in my back pocket as a proper Texas morning. I had a 2-day straight shot via Texas 71 highway towards Austin. Bruce warned me that it had heavy traffic, especially fracking sand trucks. I didn't notice much traffic in the first few miles. The shoulder was spacious, and I didn't have to worry about my safety. That was a pipe dream once the shoulder ended and everything transformed into a full-on construction zone. They were widening the highway to 4 lanes. The construction did offer some benefit since 2 new dirt lanes behind the cones were mine for the taking. I rode a few miles on this lovely, safe road before it dropped and turned into packed sand and rocks. Slowly, the road conditions got worse. Rockier, gravelier, bumpier. On this kind of road, I was always nervous about a flat. I watched my tires closely since the tread was starting to wear down. I did the dirt dance for about 5 more miles before it returned to 2-lane asphalt. I made it to a junction in the tiny town called Vuka. Bruce told me if I went through this town, it would loop me around a sand plant and possibly get me away from truck traffic. I was relieved while following his suggestion, and it was beautiful. Fields everywhere and the prettiest spring flowers. Red and yellow daisies, blue and purple flowers, all in full bloom. I returned to the highway and got spit out before the sand plants. But something horrifying happened. The wind started. The evil wind. For the next 40 miles, I fought a headwind that varied from 15 to 40 miles an hour. To make things worse, it was hill country. I kicked into high gear on a downhill to use the momentum, but the wind would stunt my speed and I'd go 5 miles an hour downhill. I'll take mountains over headwinds anytime. I couldn't think of any positive thoughts. I was in agony. Not to mention, my padless inner thighs were ravaged by the amount of force it took to pedal my bicycle. I felt the bruises rising every time I lifted up from my seat. My hand pain also started to come back slowly. They weren't numb this time, but it felt like someone had been beating my palms with hammers while tattooing my inner thighs for 4 to 5 hours. I couldn't take the pain anymore. The whole day felt hopeless. I felt entirely in the dark all day since the road had no mile markers. I also hadn't set up my new phone yet and couldn't look at a map. I was stuck in a pit of despair, waiting for a break. I hopped off my bike and walked it up the next hill. I was heated. I blamed the headwind for all my problems. I crested the top of the valley and saw the city of Lano in the distance. I was void of excitement. It only meant I had to get back on my bike to ride a few more miles to complete the day. I was done. I wanted to coast down the hill, but the wind was blowing with full force to stop my every attempt. I imagined the wind like the dark clouds in that Disney movie Fantasia. A sinister face is sweeping the storm back and forth, blowing its breath into my path.
An epic battle between Richie and his evil arch-nemesis, Wind. Wind's vicious attack and invisible agility would sway Richie at every corner. The Wind had Richie in his clutches no matter what attack he might defend against. Richie had the light inside him, but may never prevail against such an evil force.
I made it to Austin the next day and stayed at a friend of a friend's house. Caroline was a tall, bubbly blonde who went to college with someone I know back home and was seemingly successful working in marketing for a large candy company. I stayed at her boyfriend Trent's apartment and he let me have the whole place to myself for the weekend. They took me out to dinner after I cleaned up, and getting to know them was enjoyable. We were all about the same age, but they were entrapped in the corporate world, living the dream. Many people respect what I'm doing, but only because they wish they had the capacity in their own lives to get up and leave. Jobs, families, and limited PTO were all barriers that I've avoided so I can set up a life that allows me to travel and experience the world outside of my own habitat. I personally accomplished this by not having health insurance and working several part-time jobs. Austin is a great little city. They have it set up nicely for cyclists and pedestrians. I got lost on bike lanes every day just to see where I would end up. The Greenbelt River flows through the span of the city, so I also stopped for a swim here and there. Monday morning came faster than I hoped. I woke up around 7:30 a.m. and prepared to leave town quickly. I couldn't find my helmet or sun hat, then realized I'd left them at the bar the night before. As I was stuck in grief about my helmet situation, someone started knocking on the back door hard as hell. I thought it was an emergency, but nobody was there when I looked. This apartment has windows everywhere, so I hit the deck and peeked out to look at this dude who had walked around to the front door. He eventually saw me, so I got up to look at him through the peephole. He started knocking super hard and aggressively. I felt threatened. After the interaction that was to come, I was relieved I had paused to answer the door. I was scared and ready to clock this guy with a golf club. Here's how it went down. Perpetrator.
You got a light, man? I need a light.
No, I don't got a light. Can you calm down, dude?
I really need a light, guy. You got a stove?
I'm not giving you anything, dude. You're not getting in here. You need to chill and get off my property.
Bro, you better give me a light or something will happen.
Get off the property, dude. I'm gonna call the cops.
If something wrong happens here, you can only blame yourself. You should have helped me out, brother.
I called the police station instead of 911, but regretted that decision. The non-emergency operator transferred me, and I had to tell the story repeatedly to several different operators. It took 10 minutes to get an operator, and the dude had left down the street by then. I was jumbled up after that, but those 3 deadbolts on the door came in handy. I got my bike loaded up and headed south for the day. I hit a thrift store for a helmet and shot straight down I-35's access road. I hadn't originally planned to ride to San Antonio. It was only 90 miles away, and my friend Jeremy lived there with his family. Jeremy is a guy I played music with at a church in high school. He and his family are very dear to my heart and contributed to an essential part of my life. I decided to ride to San Antonio in one day and head towards Houston afterward. It was a savagely hot ride, with the temperature hitting 98 degrees by 4 p.m. I looked like a damp rag when I got to Jeremy's house. The Texas heat is no joke. His mom and dad fed us baked potatoes and pounds of ribeye that evening. We had a good time catching up on 5+ years of estrangement during the cookout feast. The next day, I had a mission to visit the Alamo. If you're unfamiliar with the Alamo, it's the building where a battle happened during the Texas Revolution. It is about as important as a statue of Andrew Jackson to me, which is to say, not at all. I was on a mission to find out if it had a basement. Pee-wee's Big Adventure is one of my favorite movies, and the joke from the movie is that a fortune teller tells Pee-wee he can find his missing bicycle in the basement of the Alamo. He travels across the country only to find out it doesn't have a basement. He was hoodwinked. I convinced Jeremy to find me a red bow tie and a gray suit, so we were off for a dumb afternoon. I changed into costume and visited the Alamo. I was surprised to see how busy it was and cracked up while we waited in line. No photography was allowed inside, but Jeremy snuck one of me while pretending to text. Unfortunately, not one person that day recognized the joke, and we were left laughing at ourselves. I did it for the love, and for Pee-wee fans all across the world. We also visited the prestigious Riverwalk, but that's less important. We ended the evening with more Texas barbecue from his dad's favorite place. After an adventurous day, I bid the family farewell before falling asleep. I had the privilege of visiting Shiner, Texas, home of the infamous Spoetzl Brewery, where the beloved Shiner Bock is brewed. I booked a tour at 11 a.m., and the guide showed us how it's made inside the production area. They explained the company's rich history in which they have been around since 1909. Their flagship beer, Shiner Bock, used to be brewed only during Lent because the recipe was from ancient monks who drank beer while fasting. My big takeaway was that an eccentric railroad tycoon started the company, and after being run into the ground, it reopened decades after Prohibition. After the tour ended, a guy named Sam asked me if I had the bike lying outside. Sam was a tad shorter than me and wearing baggy clothes. His motorized bicycle sat out next to my bike. He built the bike himself, and it looked like a lawnmower engine was rigged on it. However, he insisted that it was a kit that he bought. He told me the short version of his current life. He had hitchhiked to the West Coast, made some money trimming weed, built the bike, and was heading back home to Florida. Sam was a full-on hippie living day to day. We were heading in the same direction, so I told him we should ride the 50 miles into Eagle Lake together. On our trek east, I was thwarted by a rear flat tire. I had to tear all the equipment off my bike and finger feel for the culprit of the flat. It was a tiny staple, just like the 3 last times. I meticulously searched the tube and could not find a hole for the life of me. But it was still leaking. I ended up replacing the tube instead of patching it. Sam helped me get my tire back on, and we rode the rest of the way to town. I offered to buy him dinner, but he turned me down and said he would try to get a stranger to give him something at Buc-ee's. I thought that was peculiar, but each to his own. While I was inside to buy a drink, Sam stayed out front by the trash can, apparently panhandling. Eventually, a guy offered to buy us both drinks since we were partners. Sam started looking through the trash for food, and I told him I would give him my canned food, but again, he didn't want it. He found 2 uneaten corn dogs in a bag in the trash and was beyond psyched. I couldn't believe there were uneaten corn dogs. A Buc-ee's miracle. He went inside to warm them up in the microwave, and I was cracking up. The cashiers couldn't hide their disgust. They looked at each other through the window with repulsion as he chomped on those doggies. It's a level of don't give a fuck that I aspire to find someday. My plan for the night was to hit the Eagle Lake campground. I soon discovered the place I thought I was going to was located in Eagle Lake, California. Eagle Lake, Texas had nothing but private property around it. We didn't have a backup plan, but Sam was a pro at stealth camping situations, so I let him lead the way. We found a cemetery with a decent clearing in the back. It was close to the lake, and we immediately experienced an uncomfortable number of bugs. Sam wasn't too excited about being eaten alive all night, but we stuck around a little while and got to know each other. He explained how he went to prison for selling meth or something. After they let him out, he started following the Rainbow Tribe. The Rainbow Tribe is a loose community of hippie types who intentionally live off the waste of American society and meet up in the Northwest to trim marijuana plants like a family reunion. He told me stories of smoking anything that he found in the trash, cigarettes, weed, and other unknown substances with enough left to take a drag. He was a real go-for-it kind of dude. He explained that he had a wife and a 7-year-old daughter in Florida. His plan was to make all the money from trimming weed and bring it back to his family, who he hadn't seen in years at this point. He pulled out his phone and wanted to show me a photo of them both. I was not prepared for what popped up on that little screen. He showed me an image of his wife with her best friend, but they were both nude. Then, a recent photo of his daughter in the next swipe. I'm sure I went bright red and didn't know how to react. I kindly told him they were cute and tried to let it go, but it made me wonder what Sam would do next. I suggested we head to a municipal park a mile away, but he didn't like that idea since he had been kicked out of parks by cops before. After some coercing, he hesitantly agreed to check it out with me. We rode through the small downtown area on our way to the park. It was vacant and run down, while street lights illuminated the dusky sky. There were no businesses left, and it felt like a ghost town. Buc-ee's put everything out of business. Sam audibly imagined this strip's life in the 50s, how there was probably friendly people all over the place. The summer nights might have been filled with lights and music, or maybe there was a local bar. As we were both struck by romantic nostalgia, a guy came out from one of the storefronts and signaled us over to him. He was a middle-aged man with glasses and a dirty gray t-shirt. He was bursting with a familiar enthusiasm for adventure as we told him about our journeys across the country. We all felt this weird instant connection. His storefront door had a decal that read, "Gil James, Human Being." Gil had been a journalist in his previous life. After his wife divorced him, he decided to stop the daily grind and start doing what he always wanted, to become an artist. He explained how he bought 2 retail spaces for $7 a square foot and renovated them slowly. He collected antiques and used them to create abstract sculptures that were commentaries about politics and society. He offered to let us stay in the apartment he had built in the back of his store. He handed Sam $20 and asked him to pick up some beer for us to drink. We spent the rest of the night touring his building as he explained ongoing projects and his vision for the space. It was 7,000 square feet of wood floors, 15-foot ceilings, and random treasures all over the walls. As we drank and shared our personal stories, Gil and Sam started talking about enlightenment and far-out concepts. They discussed using drugs to achieve inner self and thinking differently about how the world is supposed to work. Gil also lit up a joint, and we all partook. Sam started going into detail about the Rainbow Tribe, and Gil was curious hearing about alternate existence in the shadows. I went to sleep listening to Sam and Gil pondering the meaning of existence and our places in the world. It's hard to explain the situation, but it was one of those things that felt like it was supposed to happen. We trusted each other and saw living as meaningful. I was stoked to have a safe and quiet place to sleep in good company. If Gil isn't a psycho killer. In the morning, I offered to do some work for Gil in exchange for letting us stay. I moved lumber from his backyard inside and organized a few large piles of raw materials. I rode a few more days to wait out a violent storm in Houston and finally concluded my journey across America's largest state. Texas was one fun adventure to the next. I experienced 1,000 miles of an America that seemed stuck in time and represented an era of grit and community. Texas truly deserves to be its own country, unlike any other state I've visited. Even in Missouri and Kansas, small towns are trying to emulate the economies of bigger cities. It's removing the affordability and sustainability of rural community. The Midwest is riddled with developments extracting maximum profit rather than the ability to achieve the American dream of providing for your family. Money and business are not passive entities. We are responsible for looking out for the bigger picture, not just our piece of the pie.